The 2022 NASCAR Xfinity Series and Truck Series schedules have officially been revealed. GMS has a big announcement in regards to their driver lineup for the 2022 season, and Matt DiBenedetto gives an update in regards to his future in NASCAR. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We've got a ton of NASCAR stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go and just start up straight into those really quickly. We're going to start off with Dale Earnhardt Jr. As Dale Earnhardt Jr. is going to be piloting Ron Bouchard's 1981 Talladega winning car for a ceremonial lap Sunday at Talladega before the Cup Series race took place. If you're his NASCAR historian or has been a fan, someone who's been a fan of NASCAR for a very long time, in 1981, Ron Bouchard passed, I believe it's Darrell Waltrip, and I think Richard Petty or someone else on the outside, and was able to sideswipe, well, not sideswipe, but he's able to go 3 wide and hold on and win the victory in a very classic photo finish. This is one of Ron Bouchard's 1 or 2 career NASCAR Cup Series victories, and he was able to do that at the track. Really awesome to see that Dale Earnhardt Jr. is going to be giving a huge gesture. This car is legendary, and I'm really happy to see Dale Earnhardt Jr. is going to be doing that. I'm really happy about that overall for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Chris Wright. As Chris Wright is going to be driving a 30 for Retta Jones Racing in a couple weeks at Kansas Speedway, and I believe the ARCA season's season finale. Chris Wright has driven multiple races for Retta Jones Racing in the ARCA Series so far in 2021. I believe in 5 or 6 races so far this year. He's had some decent statistics, including getting, I believe, a top 5 or top 6 finish at Mid-Ohio earlier this year in ARCA. So it's great to see that Chris Wright is continuing to get another opportunity race. I think this is also going to help Chris Wright out and develop in the series. I think Chris Wright's had some disappointing starts in Xfinity and trucks this year. So I think getting a little more experience in ARCA, yes, I feel, is overall not the most competitive as a whole, but the fact that he's going to continue to get more opportunities in regards to racing in ARCA, I think is going to be huge for him, and hopefully Chris Wright will at least get a top 10. I think minimum he needs to at least try to get a top 10. If he's able to do that, I think he'll have a very strong opportunity to do great. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Cody Swanson. As Cody Swanson is making his ARCA racing debut at Salem Speedway in the number 21 for GMS Racing. For a lot of you who don't know, Cody Swanson is a 5-time USAC Pro Cup, Pro Crown champion. He also did race in the SRX earlier this year, and I believe got a top 5 or a top 10 earlier this year in the SRX. GMS has already given an opportunity to a driver that got an opportunity in the SRX. They gave an opportunity to Doug Coby when he drove at Bristol, where he's able to get, I believe, a top 15 finish. As a matter of fact, I believe finished 12th or 13th in the event. So it's really cool to see that he's getting that gesture. Really cool to see he's getting an opportunity. I would not be shocked if Cody Swanson contends against guys like Ty Gibbs and Corey Haim overall for the victory. I think minimum he should focus on getting a top 5 finish. If he can do that, that'd be really impressive, considering the ARCA field is not as competitive, but you're going to have a lot of talent that's probably going to be out there. You're going to have guys like Roger Kroof are going to be out there. You're going to have guys like Daniel Dye who are also competing in this event. So I think it's really awesome to see that Cody Swanson is getting an opportunity to race in here. And if he does well enough, maybe they get more opportunities in NASCAR down the road. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but really cool to see that Cody Swanson is getting an opportunity to race for GMS in the number 21 car. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're going to have music featured in NASCAR. In Pitbull's new music video, I Feel Good, this features Daniel Suarez and Julia Piquet, who is Daniel Suarez's girlfriend. Now, Daniel Suarez has already been featured in some ways in Pitbull's music. In fact, as a matter of fact, Pitbull in a song with Luke Bryan and Trey Sackett, somehow Pitbull got to do a country song. But in that new song, Daniel Suarez was mentioned about the Daytona 500. And Daniel Suarez, again, appearing in a cameo is great. Now, of course, Daniel Suarez drives for Pitbull, who is his owner for Trackhouse Racing. So it's really cool to see that gesture in NASCAR. And great to see that NASCAR continues to get recognition in the music world, especially since Pitbull's new song, I think, is a pretty decent song overall. And Pitbull's been overall making a major comeback in the music industry as a whole as well. So it's really good to see that he's getting that huge opportunity and going forward, and really happy about that. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Spencer Boyd. As Spencer Boyd is going to be driving a 52 for Jimmy Means Racing in a week from now at the Charlotte Roval. Spencer Boyd has driven, I believe, 2 races so far for the 52 team. He's made a couple select starts so far in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Now, I'll be honest with you, my expectations for Spencer Boyd are not really that high up for the Charlotte Roval. I'm not sure how good of a driver Spencer Boyd is on the road courses, but I think it's a good opportunity that he's getting another ride. He is bringing some money, which is overall going to happen. But I'll be honest with you, like I said, I'm not expecting much from Spencer Boyd in regards to bringing up front. If he can get a top 35 with this car, I think that'll be a very solid run, and it'll help him win the owner's point position as well for the rest of the year. So good luck to Spencer Boyd, and good to see that he's getting another opportunity to race in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Garrett Smithley. As Garrett Smithley will be driving a 17th for SS Greenlight Racing this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. I'm not sure how many starts Garrett Smithley has made in the NASCAR Xfinity Series so far for this organization. Garrett Smithley has not raced that much. He hasn't, as a matter of fact, really raced that much over the last couple years in the Cup Series. He has made some starts in the past for JD Motorsports, ran a full season for them for a couple years, and he's also driven for Rick Ware Racing a couple times. As a matter of fact, we'll talk about his other riding here in just a little bit that he's been running, but he's been driving for Rick Ware for a very, very long time. Now, I'm not sure how their program is on super speedways. Again, any team can perform very, very well, so we'll have to wait and see what happens, but good luck to Garrett Smithley this weekend at Talladega. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Willie Allen. As Willie Allen is going to be driving a 25 for Rackley WAR Racing this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. This is going to be Willie Allen's first top 3 series start since 2014. I believe Willie Allen won either the 2006 or 2007 Rookie of the Years in 2007 or 2008. He had decent starts in those series, and like I said, Willie Allen hasn't been competing at the local levels in like Nashville, the National Fairgrounds, among other racetracks in the area. He started owning a truck series team with the Rackley organization, and now Willie Allen once again will be making his first top-tier start since 2014. Again, I'm not sure how well he's going to do. It's Talladega, so overall it's a crapshoot, so you really don't know how these drivers are going to perform in those specific races. But good luck to Willie Allen this week, and hopefully he will help that 25 car get a good run this weekend at Talladega. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Keith McGee. As Keith McGee is going to be driving a 41 for Cram Enterprises this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. Keith McGee has made a few select starts so far this year. He's driven for the Rayoon Brothers organization this year. He's driven, this will be his first start with the Cram Enterprises, but he also has driven for Ray Cicerelli's organization as well. He actually drove for them this past weekend at Las Vegas, though they exited the race early for being too slow. Now, this will be the best ride I think that he's gotten to run. I think the Cram Enterprises organization as a whole has been improving. They've had a lot more speed as time has gone on, so I'm hoping that Keith McGee will have a solid run, and hopefully if they can survive the big one, they'll have a good run, and maybe he'll get a top 15 or top 20 finish this weekend. That'd be really cool for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jason White. As Jason White is going to be driving a 33 for Rayoon Brothers this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. I believe this is the American Jason White. Jason White has had some decent stats on Superspeedway, so I'm not exactly sure how he's going to perform this weekend, but I'm pretty sure the A-Game is also going to be sponsoring in the Truck Series event as well, so hopefully Jason White will have a good run for the Rayoon Brothers organization. That'd be good for this organization as a whole. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Clay Greenfield. As Clay Greenfield will be driving the 11th for Spencer Davis Motorsports this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. This will be the second time that Clay Greenfield has driven the 11 this year. He's driven it earlier this year, I think Bristol this past about a week or two ago. As a matter of fact, Clay Greenfield drove this 11 car, and I think got a top 25 finish or even a top 30 finish. I think if Clay Greenfield can survive the wreck, and not to mention Clay Greenfield, I think is a very solid superspeed racer. If he survives the big one, I think he could have an outside shot of contending overall for the victory. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, but good to see that Clay Greenfield is getting another opportunity this weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Brian Doza. As Brian Doza is going to be driving the number 28 for FDNY Racing this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. The 28 team, the FDNY organization, tends to bring Brian Doza in their cars. I'm not expecting this team to be very, very competitive unless they can survive the big one. They only tend to run at Superspeedway tracks. Like I said, I'm not expecting them to be up front, but if they can survive the big one, they may be able to salvage a very strong run. Hopefully, Brian Doza will have a very strong run, and great to see that he's making another start in the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Garrett Smithley. As Garrett Smithley is going to be driving the 15th for Rick Ware Racing this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. Like I mentioned, this will be Garrett Smithley's first, or I don't know how many starts he's had in the Cup Series so far for Rick Ware Racing in the number 15 car, but I'm really happy to see that Garrett Smithley is overall getting another opportunity to race in the Cup Series. Again, I've seen the Rick Ware cars, especially on Superspeedways, they've been solidly competitive. Yes, of course, they had that debacle at Daytona where all 3 of their 4 cars basically wrecked on the front stretch about 20 laps ago that kind of caused the big ones that started happening at Daytona. That being said, though, Garrett Smithley has been a driver that almost qualified for the Daytona 500. He was very, very close to qualifying for the 500 with NBM Motorsports. So it makes a lot of sense to bring him in, and he's going to have that Xfinity Series experience coming in from the previous events. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, but good to see that Garrett Smithley is getting an opportunity to race in the Cup Series once again. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Santino Ferrucci. As Santino Ferrucci is making his official return to NASCAR. He will be driving the number 26 for Sam Hunt Racing at Talladega this weekend. This will be Santino Ferrucci's first start in the NASCAR Xfinity Series since all the way back in July at Atlanta, as he's been focusing more on Indy cars. He's made a few starts in Indy cars so far. He's driven, and also what's very interesting is the sponsorship as well that he has. Hy-Vee. I think that this also could be linked to potential third Rahal Letterman landing, right? Because remember, Hy-Vee's going to be sponsoring that third car. They're going to be funding that whole car for the entire season in 2022. And there's potential, since he is funding that ride and he's got funding from Hy-Vee, he may end up driving his car. But it's really good to see it since Santino Ferrucci is back. I know Santino Ferrucci has made a lot of people mad and angry because he's very controversial. But at the same time, Santino Ferrucci is going to bring a lot to the table. And great to see that Santino Ferrucci will get another opportunity to race in the Xfinity Series. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jordan Anderson. As Jordan Anderson is going to be driving a 31 for his own organization this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. I think that Jordan Anderson is a very solid Superspeedway racer. You look at his time in the Truck Series, especially at Daytona. The last couple years, Jordan Anderson has been extremely close to being able to go out there and contend. So it's really good to see that Jordan Anderson is overall getting an opportunity to race for his own organization. I think he could be right up there, and this could help the team get their first career win as an organization. I think that they have shown pretty good speed with all their drivers like Eric Jones. Ty Dillon was up front, and a lot of the racing was second in one of the stages. They've had Josh Berry in the rides, Tyler Reddick, among others that have driven for the ride. I think Austin Dillon's also driven to 31 as well. So hopefully they'll be able to have a very strong run, and good luck to them this weekend here at Talladega. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jason White. As Jason White is going to be driving a 66 for MBM Motorsports this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. Jason White, I believe, will be competing in that 33 for the Ram brothers, and that will give him a little bit of experience with the 6.6 car. Now, Jason White, like I said, has made a few select starts. I'm wishing him the best luck. Again, he's bringing that A-Game sponsorship, which is sponsored him in every single race. It's a new company sponsored by Johnny Damon, for those of you who do not know. But Jason White will have probably a good opportunity to run up front. And a 6.6 car have shown pretty decent speed so far in those super speedways. I mean, Timmy Hill, I believe, got a top 5 at Daytona last year before the pandemic happened. So hopefully Jason White will be able to have a very strong run this weekend at MBM Motorsports. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about J.J. Yeley. As J.J. Yeley will be driving the number 99 for BJ McLeod Motorsports this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. J.J. Yeley has made quite a few NASCAR Xfinity Series starts this year. He's driven for the Rick Ware organization. I believe he's also driven for Our Motorsports this year as well. And J.J. Yeley actually has been pretty impressive so far in those select starts. I know we kind of call him a NASCAR bust for how he was in the NASCAR Cup Series, but if you look at him in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, he's actually kind of proving a good career right now. And I wouldn't be surprised, especially with how good the BJ McLeod Motorsports team is on super speedways. I would not be shocked if J.J. Yeley gets top 10 or top 15 this weekend. I think it would help him in the owner's points position, and I think it would be a good acquisition for him to drive this car next year in that number 99. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Josh Berry. As Josh Berry is going to be driving to 1 for Junior Motorsports once again this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. This will be the second or third straight race that he has driven the 1 car. Remember, Michael Annett is still currently recovering from an injury, but this is the first time that Michael Annett has not entered on the entry list in the 1 car. He will be out once again out of this. In my honest opinion, if you're Michael Annett, either just not race the rest of the year and come back next year, or, in my opinion, just go ahead and retire. Because let's be perfectly honest and sincere, I don't think that Michael Annett is going to be fit to come back by the end of next year. I think he's going to be still recovering. But in regards to Josh Berry, he's coming off a win at Las Vegas, and winning races is overall going to get you rewards, and it's going to reward you an opportunity to continue racing as a whole. So I'm wishing the best of luck to Josh Berry in the 1 car, and hopefully he'll be able to have a very strong run this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway and help them, because again, Junior Motorsports cars are generally really fast on the super speedways, and I think they'll have a good shot of contending this weekend overall, even for the victory. And now we're going to jump on to the next stories of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the starting lineups for the Cup Series, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series this weekend here at Talladega Superspeedway. Let's start off with the Truck Series. So on the pole is going to be Ben Rose. Now, Ben Rose has historically won at Daytona Superspeedway in the past. He's actually going to be as a matter of fact, he actually is going to be my pick to win the Truck Series race at Talladega Superspeedway. I look at Ben Rose as a whole. He's been very solid on the Superspeedways, and I do think that Thorsport does have a lot of momentum coming off of with that team winning with Christian Eckes at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. I think that momentum is overall going to carry him into this weekend, and I think Ben Rose will have a very strong run this weekend at Talladega. Now let's jump on to the Xfinity Series. Justin Allgaier, after finishing runner-up at Talladega, he will be starting on the pole this weekend in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. My pick to win the Xfinity Series race is going to be the guy who won the last time we were at a super speedway, Justin Haley. Justin Haley has won 4 of the last 5 super speedway races that have taken place, and all the races that have been won by them have been on, besides, I think, Austin Cindric. I think that Kaulig Racing has won 4 or 5 or 5 of the last 6 super speedways in the last couple of years. They become the DEI team, and I think that Justin Haley will overall get the victory. And now up to the Cup Series. Denny Hamlin will be starting on the pole for the Cup Series race, with Kyle Busch starting on the outside after Kyle Busch, I believe, finished 3rd in the Cup Series race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. My winner's pick for the race, though, is going to be Ryan Blaney. Ryan Blaney's been historically really good on super speedways. I picked him in my race picks video. You should definitely go check that out. I think that Ryan Blaney will overall get the victory, and he will be able to lock himself up on a win. And those are the picks and the starting lineups for this weekend. Now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to be taking a look at Alex Bowman's 2020 LA Charlotte FC scheme that we're going to be seeing in a week or so at the Charlotte Roval. I really like this paint scheme a lot, and I'll be honest with you, I'm overall a much bigger fan of the traditional Ally scheme, but what I like about Ally is they're allowing Alex Bowman to really change up the paint scheme as a whole, and I will have to say that I do like the color contrast on it. I think they did a really solid job on this paint scheme as a whole. I think it looks really, really solid. I'm looking forward to see this car out on the racetrack. Maybe with the new paint scheme, we'll see Alex Bowman have a lot of luck, especially since Alex Bowman has historically been really, really good at the Charlotte Roval. I think Alex Bowman could surprise a lot of people, and I think that this scheme looks really awesome. I'm looking forward to see it out on the racetrack this weekend, and next weekend, at the Charlotte Roval. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to be taking a little bit of a look at North Wilkesboro. Now, Save the Speedway basically tweeted out looks at North Wilkesboro, and I have to say, taking a look at North Wilkesboro, not going to lie, I'm extremely surprised that North Wilkesboro looks as good as it is, but they've been doing a lot of cleanup over at North Wilkesboro. Remember, North Wilkesboro got $10 million from the state. They were trying to get another $10 million to add up to $20 million to get a budget there. You also have Marcus Motorsports basically chipping in to try to get $1 million in for it himself, and not building a camper roll on top of it, by basically spending $1 million and helping out North Wilkesboro get back up as well. And I have to say, like I said, the track is almost looking to be raceable. I still think that there are things that need to be done at North Wilkesboro, but the fact that North Wilkesboro is starting to look like that and starting to look as good as it is, there is hope that for the first time in a long time that racing in North Wilkesboro can happen. I'll be honest with you, I'll be extremely happy if North Wilkesboro can get a race. Yes, of course, the account can definitely be a little bit problematic at points, but at the same time, I understand what they're trying to advocate for, and hopefully they'll be able to be very, very successful. But at the same time, hopefully North Wilkesboro will have an opportunity to continue being very, very successful, and hopefully they will be able to have a chance of getting back up. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kurt Busch and the Charlotte Roval. Now, this upcoming, well, not this weekend, but the next upcoming weekend at the Charlotte Roval, Kurt Busch and a lot of NASCAR drivers are going to be doing something really cool. It was first reported by, I believe, it's Kelly Crandall or Alex Andreevich. It was reported that Kurt Busch received a fan letter in 2019 that inspired him to launch a NASCAR initiative for pink window nets to be used in the Cup race at the Charlotte Roval. I don't know how many Cup Series drivers are going to be getting involved with this initiative, but they are going to be doing, a lot of drivers are going to be involved, including Kurt Busch. I think maybe Xfinity and Truck Series also might be getting involved with this. What I really like about this is Kurt Busch is getting the initiative. Of course, in October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so I think it's really cool. Again, I'm not sure how the paint schemes will look with the pink window nets, but I do like that a lot of drivers are going to be getting involved in that as a whole. I think that's really, really solid that they are doing that. It's a really awesome gesture nonetheless for a month that is very, very tough for certain individuals. And to me, I think it's really awesome that they're doing that initiative. I'm really happy about that for sure. And I think some paint schemes are going to look really, really cool and it's really, really sick. I saw the Kurt Busch one. I think it looks really, really cool. And it's a really awesome initiative and an awesome gesture for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Greg Zipadelli. As Greg Zipadelli is going to be crew chiefing for Kevin Harvick this weekend at Talladega Super Speedway. For a lot of you who have not been paying attention, Ronnie Childers was suspended this past weekend for 2 lug nuts not being safe and secure. And if you have more than 1 lug nut that is not safe and secure, your crew chief ends up getting suspended. Ronnie Childers received a $20,000 fine, and he basically was suspended for 1 race. Now, Ronnie Childers is expected to be back in the coming weeks or so, but Ronnie Childers will not be here this weekend, and Greg Zipadelli will be there this weekend. I think Greg Zipadelli back in the day was a legendary crew chief. He has recently crew chief for Clint Boyer in 2 races and also crew chief for Chase Briscoe in 4 races. And he has some pretty decent stats. I think he also led Chase Briscoe to, I think, 1 or 2 Xfinity Series victories. And even to say, I think he was a very, very solid crew chief even to this day and was able to go in there and substitute for people at certain points. Greg Zipadelli is a competition director right now, I believe, for Stewart Haas Racing. I think that he'll bring a lot of initiative to Kevin Harvick. If you're going to have one week where you're not going to have your traditional crew chief, though, this is overall the week to have it. And hopefully what Greg Zipadelli will be able to do is go in there and help Kevin Harvick have a very strong run and salvage the run, because Tony Stewart was also really good at Silver Speedways with Greg Zippy on the box. And I think that Greg will help Kevin Harvick have a good run. I think Greg is absolutely a great substitute crew chief overall, in my honest and sincere opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about an update in regards to Jay Fabian. Now, Bob Pockers reported on his Twitter that Jay Fabian has probable cause hearing set for November 12th in regards to being arrested on animal cruelty charges. If you've not been paying attention, Jay Fabian was arrested about a month or 2 ago and has not been working in NASCAR ever since due to potential animal cruelty charges. NASCAR Spinny Series and Truck Series directors have basically been running the show, and the inspection line has been being run by Scott Miller, and I can't remember who else has been running the show on that front, but they've had a couple of people running it as well. I've never really been a big fan of Jay Fabian when he's been the official. I think he's been one of the guys that has been behind a lot of problems this year in regards to officiating, and I think that with him being out, except this past weekend in Las Vegas for the Truck Series, I do think that officiating in the Cup Series has generally been getting a lot better, and I think that he's been one of the big causes. A lot of people are generally not big fans of it. Even if he is not guilty of the situation, it does come back that he was not guilty on November 12th, and it doesn't go through. I really hope Jay Fabian is never able to come back, because I think that he's been, like I said, one of the big probable causes to the struggle so far this year with a lot of the officiating. A lot of the officiating problems that happened this year. Look back last year at the Shaw Roval, the wet weather race, where so many cars basically wrecked, and it took them so long to throw a red flag in that race. You look back this year in 2020 at the Daytona road course. You look back at the Dakota race. You look back at Shaw for the Truck Series. There's so many incidents that I think he's been involved in, and he's been really officiating a lot of the things that have been going on. I think that with him being out of the sport, I do think officiating has gotten a lot better. Like I said, besides the Truck Series race that took place at Las Vegas. But I'm definitely intrigued to see what happens in regards to this, if he's guilty or not. We will find out here coming very, very soon. We've been wanting a little bit of update in regards to that, and we got a pretty interesting update in regards to that. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Camping World Truck Series race so far in 2021. According to Adam Stern, Fox Sports 1 is averaging 602,000 viewers so far for the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series season, which is up 12% versus 2019 and 19% from last year. It is really good that the Truck Series is continuing to increase their viewership, considering these races take place on Friday night, and even a lot of people that go out to certain events on Friday nights and even Saturday afternoons and Saturday night as well. The fact that they've been able to increase viewership on that front is really, really cool. But I think there's one big reason, and one big reason only, why the Truck Series has increased their viewership. One driver only. Hailie Deegan. Hailie Deegan has a ton of followers on social media, and she does share her experience on her YouTube channel, which has like 1 million subscribers. Her Deegan Family channel, which has overall 1 million subscribers, and she has like 400,000 followers on Twitter, I think, and over 1 million followers on Instagram. So, of course, she is going to be able to bring new eyes into the sport, especially as being a pretty decent driver so far in trucks, so she has been disappointing at points here in certain races, which she's been expected to run well. People are very intrigued to see how she is going to run, and she brought viewers into K&N and ARCA, helped that series grow in some ways. And also, I do think that you have some good drivers racing as well. Now, let's be honest, some of the racing trucks has been definitely really hard to watch and very unbearable to watch at certain points. But at the same time, the fact that the ratings have increased for the Truck Series, I think is really, really cool. And I'm happy about that for sure. And it helps the Truck Series continue to grow long term. So I think that they can reach more viewership. And they may be able, as the season goes on, they may be able to bring more viewership in the sport. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But it's really cool to see that the TV ratings for trucks has been pretty solid. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Las Vegas TV ratings from this past weekend. Also reported by Adam Stern, NBCSN got a 1.21 rating and 2.095 million viewers for Sunday's South Point 400 at Las Vegas, which is up slightly from a 1.15 rating and 1.97 million viewers for last year's race, and extending the increased streak to 6 races for the first time since 2011. And he also noted that 5 of the final 6 races are going to be on main NBC. The only race that will not be on main NBC is going to be the Kansas race, which will take place to be the third to final race of a NASCAR Cup Series season. Even though it's not a major increase, the fact that it did increase it very, very slightly, it continues to be a really good thing for the sport. It was reported last week that NASCAR had 5 straight races where the ratings have been up. The one thing I am worried about long term is that the ratings may have a major decrease as time goes on. But I think that we have to take these wins in a really, really good way. If we're able to keep up this momentum, especially after Talladega, where I think the ratings will probably be up once again, if we're able to keep all those viewers in, is really, really great. And you have to consider that I think the Packers game was going on this past weekend on NBC, which is a game that's going to bring a lot of people in. Yet I think the San Francisco 49ers versus the Green Bay Packers game, and like I said, a lot of people are going to overall tune into that game as a whole. And it was on main NBC. And again, you had the Las Vegas Raiders game that was going on as well. The attendance was not that great, to be perfectly honest with you, but again, you had the Raiders game going on at this point, and I think the Golden Knights have started up the NHL season as well, which I think that's one thing that has contributed to not as many people showing up to those events. But to me, I think it's really, really cool to see that the ratings continue to go up on a week-by-week basis. We have to take these wins by storm. It's really, really good to see again. Considering that the race was not that fantastic, I do feel bad for the people that watch it, because let's be for real, the race was not very entertaining. But the fact that we still got viewership, good viewership, considering the race was not the greatest souls. Let's be for real, a lot of people don't like the driver that won. You look at the Jeff Gluck poll that happened this weekend. The Jeff Gluck poll was not that great, in my honest opinion. But it's still really cool to see that we're continuing to see increased ratings for NASCAR as a whole, and I'm really happy about that for sure. And hopefully, for the last 5 or 6 weeks of the season going into the final few weeks, we will continue to have huge increase in ratings, and we'll see great ratings for Talladega. Hopefully, that'll happen very, very soon for sure. Now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Team Penske's Xfinity Series program for 2022. Someone had asked in regards to what the plans are for the 2022 NASCAR Xfinity Series season for Team Penske is going to be. Bob Pockrass basically responded that, and he says that Penske's decision on Xfinity Series program is to be announced and to be determined. From what we've been hearing in regards to that program, it's very unclear what the plans are, because remember, Austin Cindric is going to be moving up full-time to the Cup Series in the number 2 car. We'll talk about the crew chief lineup for next year on here in just a little bit. But Austin Cindric will be moving up full-time to the Cup Series in 2022. And a lot of the people really don't know right now what the plans are going to be for Team Penske's Xfinity Series program in 2022. What I think is going to happen with the Team Penske Xfinity Series program is I think that they're going to use a bunch of Cup Series drivers to run that program for 2022. And in the Dash for Cash races, in the playoff races, they're going to choose a few select drivers. I think one of those drivers will probably end up being Ernie Francis Jr. Ernie Francis Jr. has had some initiative to maybe run some IndyCar races in the foreseeable future, and had about a month or two ago been pushing with help from Marcus Monis and Campbell. He had been wanting to try to help get some races done in NASCAR. Remember, Marcus Monis does really have big sponsorship in the Camping World Truck Series, so I think that he would get a lot of help from the Camping World organization to run that event as well. You look at another driver that might be able to run a few select starts. What about Todd Gilliland? Now, we do know there's potential to Front Row Motorsports could move on down to the Xfinity Series, sell one of their cars, and move down to the Xfinity Series for 2022, and maybe Todd Gilliland moves up to the Xfinity Series there. But if they don't drop down the Xfinity Series, Front Row does not drop down next year, I think that you overall have a driver right here that could really, really be an initiative for the organization going forward. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that. But I think you have a few drivers that you could use. You also use Hailie Deegan. We know that she's probably going to feel long-term going to be at SHR. But if she doesn't run for SHR and you don't expand to 2-car operation on a part-time basis next year, I do think that Hailie Deegan going part-time with Team Penske would not be a terrible option either. Because remember, she does want to run a few select Xfinity Series starts. Of course, she does want to focus on running full-time in trucks next year, but she does want to make a few Xfinity Series cars, but I don't really blame her on that front. But we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to the Xfinity Series program going into next year. It could definitely be really interesting going forward, and we'll see what happens in their Xfinity Series program next year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Denny Hamlin. Now, Denny, someone had basically was talking about in regards to how they wish that Kyle Larson and Denny Hamlin had their full points paying season, where they'd be able to basically fight out with the full regular season points championship. And Denny Hamlin said that Game 7 moments are special for a reason. They don't happen all the time. Would have been fun to watch down the stretch. Now, Denny Hamlin's represented in regards to Kyle Larson and his battle really for the championship in the regular season. You look at their points positions, and Denny Hamlin, I believe, holds that cup right now by a few points over Kyle Larson. Those two have been really fighting for the last 15 or 16 in the regular season championship. I've been a big someone that has like some aspects of the playoffs, but in my honest opinion, I do miss that we don't have that regular season championship battle where the regular season matters a lot more. And NASCAR should emphasize long term a lot more on focusing on the regular season championships. I do think that it would really help the sport long term going forward if that was able to be the case. I know NASCAR has some things that they're overall focusing on in some other aspects, but at the same time, I do think that it'd be really, really cool if NASCAR could put a little more focus on the regular season, and maybe that at the end of the year, maybe they could somehow reward a regular season champion, whoever wins it all together, give them some sort of points or something like that, or something like that along the lines. I think that's really cool. Of course, they do give a regular season champion at the end of the regular season, where they do give the guy 15 playoff points, and they do get a trophy as well, which is something really, really cool to see. But for the first time really in a long time, really since they started introducing playoff points, we had a regular season championship that kind of actually mattered. And because of the playoff format, it doesn't really matter long term. So I think it'd be really, really cool if NASCAR could get that notion going forward. Maybe NASCAR will think about doing something like that going forward, and maybe Denny Hamlin's comments will go up to NASCAR. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Greg Biffle. As Greg Biffle has been potentially teasing a return to NASCAR. Greg Biffle tweeted out saying, "So I've heard a rumor that the Xfinity Series is going to race in my hometown, which is up in the Portland area, next year. I should get my gear ready." Now, Greg Biffle has not raced in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in quite a bit of time. In fact, I think the last time Greg Biffle competed in the NASCAR Xfinity Series was around 2010 or 2011 when he drove, I believe, either the 16 or the 27 for the Baker Curb organization in 2010, where he overall competed for victories. Greg Biffle, over time, has made a few select NASCAR Truck Series starts. In 2019, he made his return to the NASCAR Truck Series driving for Kyle Busch Motorsports and was able to win that at Texas Motor Speedway. And in 2020, he made a one-off start at Darlington Race, where I believe finished 15th or 16th. And Greg Biffle has also been competing in the SRX as well. He's been competing in those select events, as we're showing overall some pretty decent pace as a whole. And that actually almost won a race in the SRX as well. And we've won a heat race in there nonetheless in the SRX this year. So Greg Biffle, even at the age of over 50 years old, knows how to get it done. I also do believe that Greg Biffle in the Truck Series, when the Truck Series did compete at Portland, he does able to compete. Now, what team would pick up Greg Biffle for next year when they do go to Portland next year? We'll talk about that in just a bit. I think that Greg Biffle honestly could go to any organization next year that'd be willing to hire him. Maybe Junior Motorsports, maybe Dale Jr. gives him a one-off opportunity. Maybe Joe Gibbs Racing. And I think about Joe Gibbs Racing as a whole. Remember, Joe Gibbs Racing, we don't entirely know the plans for next year. We do know that Kyle Busch will not be competing in the Xfinity Series next year. We know that that is not going to be happening in 2022. So that's at least one benefit for the Xfinity Series next year. Maybe if Joe Gibbs does run a few extra opportunities going into next year, Greg Biffle will get that opportunity to run. So hopefully Greg Biffle does return to the NASCAR Xfinity Series on a one-off opportunity. I think it'd be really, really cool for him to come back. And I think it'd be big for the Xfinity Series as well. And I do think, especially with more returns, we've been seeing some drivers make up some one returns. Look at Andy Lally. He's been running some one-offs. He could be running some future road courses, maybe at Portland later in the future. You've had other drivers come back, like Miguel Paludo, who's made a few sled starts, and Greg Biffle has made a few starts. So I think if they does return to the Xfinity Series, because we're going to be going to Portland for them next year, I think that Greg Biffle would be a really good notion for the team. And I think if he goes to Joe Gibbs Racing, you would have that veteran presence there that you're going to need. And I think it'd be cool to see him make a one-off return for an organization. I think it'd be a great storyline, and I think he'd be honestly really, really competitive in regards to what ride he's able to get. I think it'd be really cool to see Greg Biffle get a one-off opportunity to race in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jimmie Johnson and his venture into the Indy 500. It was reported earlier today by Adam Stern that Jimmie Johnson says it's currently looking good for him to run next year's 2022 Indianapolis 500 for the first time ever, though there are still details being worked on and it's still not a done deal yet. Now, for those of you who have not been paying attention, there has been talk for quite a bit of time that Jimmie Johnson has been looking to run the Indianapolis 500, and coming up here in the next week or so, Jimmie Johnson is going to be having his Indy 500 rookie orientation test that he has to pass. Him and Romain Grosjean will be having their tests. Now, I believe both are going to be separate days. They originally were supposed to run on the same day, but both of them are going to be running on separate days for the event. I think Jimmie Johnson will go first, and then I think Romain Grosjean is going to go second. I think Jimmie Johnson running the Indy 500 will be really, really huge. Now, what team is he going to run for? I think, of course, he will be driving for Chip Ganassi Racing. I think it will get full flags into that number 48, or maybe he'll drive another car like the Trackhouse car, because remember, Trackhouse Racing has been rumored to have a notion to going to the net, basically into IndyCar. I think that Jimmie Johnson would definitely bring a lot to the table, though. Again, Jimmie Johnson, I also think, should have maybe ran some ovals, and the reason that Jimmie Johnson overall has been hesitant to run ovals throughout his entire IndyCar career is because of the safety of IndyCar, but he's been more and more as time has gone on, he has been getting really, really, really more excited about potentially running, and I think as time has gone on, especially in IndyCar, I think his confidence has been getting a lot better, and I do think that is helping him potentially make a run to run the Indianapolis 500. And I think if I'm Jimmie Johnson personally, I think that he'll also bring a lot of NASCAR fans, because you still have a lot of NASCAR fans that are big fans of Jimmie Johnson. I think that also is going to help the TV ratings for the Indianapolis 500 as well. The Indy 500 this year had a lot of fans join in, and they've had a huge increase in viewership and overall huge increase in ratings this year in 2021. I think they said that it was the most watched year for IndyCar ever on TV, so with like 30 years, and the Indy 500 had its biggest boom in since 2011 or even before that. So I think if you have Jimmie Johnson come around the Indy 500, you're going to get a few more fans that tune into that event. And there's also talk going on, not to mention, that Kyle Larson could run the Indianapolis 500 as well. Could you imagine a lineup of drivers like this? Scott McLaughlin, Kyle Larson, Romain Grosjean, Jimmie Johnson. I think if you have all those drivers running the Indianapolis 500, I think it's going to be really, really huge overall for the sport if you have all those drivers competing for those events as a whole. I hope it does happen. I hope Jimmie Johnson does get an opportunity to come over to IndyCar, but like I said, I think Jimmie Johnson coming here, he's been getting better at IndyCar. His confidence has been growing as time has gone, and I think that announcement is going to be coming very, very soon for him to run it. If he's able to pass his rookie orientation test, which is coming up really, really soon, I think that we will see Jimmie Johnson race the IndyCar. I genuinely do, and I cannot tell you how excited I am if he's able to do it again. It's not exactly confirmed when it's going to happen, but I do think that Jimmie Johnson will bring a lot to the table for IndyCar. I think it's really exciting that Jimmie Johnson is considering running IndyCar. I think it'd be really awesome for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Team Penske's 2022 crew chief lineup. It was revealed this morning around 11 a.m. Eastern Time, their 2022 crew chief lineup. Jerry Bones will be remaining in the 2 camp. He will be crew chief for Austin Cindric in 2022. He has been crew chief for Brad Keselowski over the last couple years. He will be crew chief for him. Jonathan Hassler is going to be moving over from the 21 car from Wood Brothers Racing, and he'll be crew chief for Ryan Blaney this year. Remember, it was already announced that Ty Gordon will be retiring at the end of the 2021 season, and now they will be bringing Jonathan Hassler in-house into that number 12 car, and Paul Wolfe will retain his role as being a crew chief for Joe Logano in 2022. I think that this is really, really good overall as a whole for the organization to keep Jeremy Bones and Paul Wolfe in their respective roles. I wasn't sure if Jeremy Bones may have been going back to Ryan Blaney for 2022, because I think Jerry Bones had a working relationship with Ryan Blaney. He got him overall some victories. Paul Wolfe, though, has made Joe Logano, I think, a pretty solid driver. I know that they have not been able to win a ton of races so far together, and I think that Ty Gordon Red really helped out him this year. But at the same time, I do think that Paul Wolfe will continue to bring a lot to the team for Joe Logano next year, and I think that veteran presence, two really solid people working together, two former drivers working together, will overall help it out as a whole. I think both of them working together would be really, really great. And now jumping on to Jonathan Hassler. Jonathan Hassler, crew chief for Ryan Blaney, is definitely really, really interesting to me. I think for Matt DiBenedetto's sake, you look at Matt DiBenedetto this year when Jonathan Hassler has been up on the box. I think that Jonathan Hassler has really helped out Matt DiBenedetto in his starts, and I think ever since Jonathan Hassler has basically gotten into the crew chief role for Matt DiBenedetto full on after Greg Irwin had exited out of his role as a crew chief for him, I do think that he has improved as a driver, and Matt DiBenedetto really started going on a run of consistency, finishing in the top 10 and top 15 in many, many events. Unfortunately, what ended up really happening in regards to that was that it was really too late for that. But I do think it's really interesting to bring in Jonathan Hassler. And now, what are my expectations going into next year for all these drivers? I think Ryan Blaney will get 1 or 2 wins with Jonathan Hassler next year minimum. I think Joe Logano will be very, very solid and competitive once again next year. And I think Austin Cindric, with Jeremy Bones working with him, that guy who has already worked with the 2 team for the last 2 years, I do think that it'll be a really good combination for all of them. I mean, Jeremy Bones, I think, had a little few starts with Austin Cindric and Xfinity, not to mention that. So I do think that all of them working together will be very, very good as a whole for the organization. I think it's a really good crew chief lineup. I know they made some big shakeups in the last couple of years, and I do think that Jonathan Hassler being a replacement for Todd Gordon, I think is really, really good. Good luck to Todd Gordon and whatever he does in his future endeavors, but I'm really happy to see that this lineup is what it's going to be next year. I think it's a really good lineup for 2022. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Denny Hamlin and some of his thoughts on the next-gen car. Denny Hamlin was on Racing Spaces this past weekend, and he actually run Tuesday, as a matter of fact, and he was talking about his thoughts on the next-gen car. He says that the next-gen ship's different, drives different completely, and sim doesn't adequately mirror the actual car, so practice time is essential. This thing is a different machine. There will certainly be more wrecks, no question about that. He also did say that I'm optimistic throughout the sport for the next 4 or 5 years in regards to rewarding talent over money. He thinks we can get back to that. Some of Denny Hamlin's comments were definitely really interesting. He did talk about the heat of the car, which, again, the heat is one thing that NASCAR and them are going to be able to work. You remember the test that took place at Daytona. There have been some complaints about the heating, of course, in events. And he also did one thing he did mention in that Racing Spaces is that it was very, very hard to see. He couldn't see over those hills. So Martinsville definitely is going to be tracks like Martinsville, tracks like Bristol, especially where you can't see those short tracks. It might be very, very difficult to make passes as a whole, especially on those flat tracks. It might be very difficult. New Hampshire is one of those tracks that gets involved in the sport. But one thing I will say is the fact that Denny Hamlin is bringing up the fact that we may be able to get back to the talent of 4 or 5 years from now, that really back giving talent over money. I think it's one comment I really want to see. I want to see the best drivers out there be able to get in sport. Because let's be honest, even in the Cup Series right now, you do have some positions and people right now that aren't deserving of the rides they have. And I'm not talking about all the drivers. I think a majority of the drivers that are in their respective Cup Series rides right now, I do think deserve to be in their respective rides. I'm not saying those drivers don't deserve to be there. But at the same time, you do have drivers that 100% do not deserve to overall be in the rides that they are in my honest opinion. And I think if we can get back to that in the future, in a few years' time, where all the best drivers could be in the best equipment and money basically isn't the biggest thing over time, I think that's going to be great overall for the sport. Of course, Denny Hamlin is going to be an owner in the next couple of years and be out of the sport completely. So I think, of course, Denny Hamlin is going to have some positive comments. And he's a guy, though, I trust when it comes to his thoughts on the next-gen car. I do trust a guy like Denny Hamlin over some of these younger drivers. And this is no offense and no disrespect to all the young guys who have tested an action car, but I'm going to trust a guy who's been doing this for a very, very long time and who knows everything in and out of the sport, who's been in sport for nearly 20 years. I'm going to trust what Denny Hamlin has to say. So I'm really excited about that overall for sure. Hit some of his thoughts. I know he still has some concerns, but they're going to be able to work with the teams. There has been concerns that they may be behind some parts and pieces, which are going to have some of those concerns going forward. So definitely interesting in regards to Denny Hamlin's comments, and hopefully those will pan out going forward. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 3 major stories of today's episode, as we're talking about GMS Racing. It was reported, first of all, by Michael Carey that GMS Racing is going to have a special announcement regarding their 2022 driver lineup on Friday, October 1st at Talladega Superspeedway at the Freight 8 Auctions panel at 4:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, so 2:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time at Talladega Superspeedway on Friday evening. This has been teased for a while. It was actually teased about a week ago that they have basically been able to announce their plans on October 1st. And earlier today, they actually did tease the number that they're going to have on Friday, October 1st. And the number is going to be the number 23. Now, what does that mean for Chase Purdy going into next year? I would not be shocked if Chase Purdy is getting moved around to another truck next year, and maybe they're going to be putting someone else in that ride. But I do think that there is going to be someone going to ride. From what I've been told by insider information, I have 4 drivers that could potentially be going into this ride next year. The first one, and this is the most likely, is Matt DiBenedetto. And I'll get into why Matt DiBenedetto here just right now. I don't think Matt DiBenedetto is going to go to ride because, one, he doesn't bring a lot of funding, and he's kind of burned bridges with other organizations like Team Penske. And there's people that probably work at Team Penske that have talked to GMS Racing. I think that this is the most unlikely to happen. The second driver that I've heard, and this is the next most unlikely from what I've heard, is Rafael Lessard. Now, Rafael Sard has so far driven for the organization. GMS drove a lot of races, but he was kicked out earlier this year due to not having enough sponsorship and not funding. He left the team, but he did compete in the Canadian Tire Series or the Penny Series and actually got a couple wins in Final Teaches organization in the Sunset Raceway, I think, early in the year in 2021 in the Penny Series. So he's definitely a really talented driver, and I think he wasn't performing as good, but he was able to show it up in Canada, and he's a guy that I think deserves an opportunity. But again, sponsorship is the really big question for him, so that's why I'm not saying it's going to be him. The second most likely driver, and this one I think have a little bit back in behind, is Ryan Preece. Ryan Preece has been teasing, and I think Ryan Preece would be a really good driver because Ryan Preece is currently a free agent at this particular moment. And I think Ryan Preece is a very solid and a very, very excellent driver and knows how to get it done on the racetrack. I know that his time in JG Doherty has not overall been the most pleasant or overall has been the most great. But when you look at a driver like Ryan Preece, I think he'd be a great driver. I just don't think he's the most likely because, again, he doesn't bring a lot of funding. I think if he's going to go down to Truck Series, I think he's going to go to DJR Racing. If he's going to go to Xfinity next year, I think he's going to go to SHR. If he's going to go to Cup, I think he's going to go to Spire. I don't think he's going to get into running a GMS. I think that veteran presence definitely is going to help them for sure if he was to be the driver. But I do think that he's not going to be the driver. But I think he's the second most likely. The driver that I think is going to end up driving for GMS Racing, and this is one that I've been hearing from multiple people, I think the driver is going to be Grant Enfinger. Now, first, there's a couple reasons why I think it's going to be Grant Enfinger. The first reason why I think it will be Grant Enfinger is, one, Grant Enfinger they mentioned on the broadcast, FS1 broadcast, that Grant Enfinger does have a big announcement that's dropping very, very soon. Number two, if you take a look at the colors of the truck that were teased earlier today, Grant Enfinger has driven those same colors in multiple different rides, and he does have a little bit of funding, not to mention on that. On top of that, Grant Enfinger so far in the Camping World Truck Series, I think has been very, very solid. And I think that's one thing overall that GMS has been lacking. Remember, they're losing Sheldon Creed at the end of this year. And one thing that they are lacking right now is leadership in an older presence, especially since after Brett Moffitt basically burned his bridges with GMS Racing after 2020. They don't have really a veteran driver there. Their oldest driver, I think, was Zane Smith or Sheldon Creed, and they're both like 20 years old. So they don't have that veteran driver and that veteran focus right now. I think if you get a guy like Grant Enfinger, I think he comes into the team and makes him really, really solid. So that announcement will be at 4:30, and I think that it will be Grant Enfinger. I think he's definitely a good choice. Now, if it is truly Grant Enfinger, what are my expectations for him? I do think that Grant Enfinger will have a very strong shot of being extremely competitive, and I think they'll have a very awesome opportunity to run up front. Good luck to Grant. Hopefully, Grant Enfinger does get the ride. We'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that. But I think it'll be Grant Enfinger who will be driving that truck next year. That's what I've been hearing, and I think that Grant Enfinger will be driving for GMS next year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode. And speaking of one of the drivers, we're going to talk about Matt DiBenedetto. Now, Matt DiBenedetto was on Sirius and NASCAR Radio today, and he provided an update in regards to his 2022 plans. And he says that right now that he has nothing as of right now going into 2022. Remember, Matt DiBenedetto is currently not in a ride for 2022 after he was let go from Wood Brothers Racing while he's still racing, but he will not be returning to Wood Brothers in 2022. As in 2022, Harris Burton, who does have funding from Dex Imaging, he'll be jumping up from the Xfinity Series where he currently drives for Joe Gibbs Racing's number 20 car. He'll be moving up to the Cup Series to drive for Wood Brothers in 2022. Now, Matt DiBenedetto's future, like I said, is very, very uncertain at the moment. And I'll be honest with you, I am very concerned for Matt DiBenedetto's future. And one of the biggest reasons why I am worried about Matt DiBenedetto's future right now is because of sponsorship and funding. If you look at the last couple of years, Matt DiBenedetto basically in 2020 and 2021, he has had one major sponsor and one major sponsor that has really, really helped him, and that has been Menards. Paul Menard basically drove him back and chose him back in 2020 when he decided to retire after 2019 and chose Matty D to be the driver. And Menards was fully funding them. But I do think that with Matt DiBenedetto, also not mentioned, not making the playoffs in 2021 and barely making in 2020 and not winning a race, I do think that has made their decision easier as well. And look at Harrison Burton compared to Matt DiBenedetto. Yes, Harrison Burton I don't think is going to be much better than Matt DiBenedetto has been, but Harrison Burton has 4 career NASCAR Xfinity Series victories, and like I said, does have sponsorship in Dex Imaging, which has affiliation with Team Penske. So I think it makes a lot of sense to bring Harrison Burton. I was kind of surprised when that rumor started that Harrison Burton was going to be the driver of that team, but the more that came out, the more that made more sense for him to go to that ride in 2022. So I'll be honest with you. I don't know what happens to Matt DiBenedetto next year. I do think that Matty D's future is very, very tough. I think Xfinity that there are definitely a few rides because, again, I think if he stays in Cup, I think the only ride I think that he could go to is Frye Motorsports. That's the only ride I think he can go to. And I'm not sure that they're going to be able to bring him. Now, they do have charter, and I do think that they do have some sponsorship for that 77 car. So funding might not be as important, but I still think that Ryan Preece has a good opportunity to go over to Spire Motorsports that car 2022. So if that ride does not become available for Matt DiBenedetto, let's jump down to the Xfinity Series. You have 2 or 3 teams that I think that could be where Matt DiBenedetto goes. First one, what about Joe Gibbs Racing? Joe Gibbs Racing has a few rides that are going to be available next year. Daniel Hemrick is going to Cog Racing in 2022. He'll be driving an 11 car for that team next year, and Poppy Banks expected to go over there. And you also have another ride, that 20 car, that is going to be available. Now, I expect Ty Gibbs to be in that 18 car next year in 2020. It's basically been confirmed by multiple reports that he is going to be in that ride in 2022. But you're going to potentially have the 19 car available. The future of Brandon Jones is not, we don't know much about Brandon Jones. I know he brings a little bit of funding, but that ride could be available. And it is believed potentially that John Hunter Nemechek could be jumping up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series next year after a very solid truck series year with 5 or 6 victories. John Hunter Nemechek could be having an opportunity to go up there next year. To me, I think the other ride is Richard Childress Racing. Richard Childress Racing, they have mentioned, and it was mentioned that Sheldon Creed is going to have a good teammate. Matt DiBenedetto does have a ton of experience in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and also I think that RCR would be really, really not bullish to not pick up a driver like Matt DiBenedetto if he is available. Yes, Matt does not bring a lot of funding, and Maya Center does have a lot of funding, but the difference is I think that Matt DiBenedetto would be a guy to be able to win races with this organization. Yes, I'm being serious when I say that. I think Matty D can win races with this team. So I think if he goes back down to Xfinity, I think that Joe Gibbs Racing and RCR are the most likely. I don't think Cog's on the table because Cog, I think they're going to be following up their team maybe with Zane Smith next year perhaps. Zane Smith's been brought up into question potentially to go to Cog really for a while now. He could be going there in 2021. And I don't think Junior Motorsports is going to be up into question. So if he's going to go to that Xfinity with a competitive ride, I think it's between Joe Gibbs Racing and that RCR for 2022. We'll have to wait and see what happens. We'll have to see where Matt DiBenedetto goes, but his future continues to be really uncertain at the moment. And now we're going to jump on to the final stories of today's episode. We've been here for a very, very long time. Let's jump into those. The 2022 NASCAR Xfinity Series and Truck Series schedules have officially been revealed. Let's first take a look at the 2022 Xfinity Series schedule and then take a look at the Truck Series schedule. So, starting off on the season will begin at Daytona International Speedway on February 19th. After that, a week later, we'll head to Auto Club Speedway on February 26th. And then after that, we'll head to Las Vegas on March 5th. After that, we'll head to Phoenix National Speedway on March 12th. And after that, we'll head to Atlanta Motor Speedway on March 19th. After that, we'll be heading to Dakota on March 26th and then Richmond on April 2nd. After that, we'll head to Martinsville on April 8th. And then after that, we'll have about a 1 or 2 week break for Xfinity. And then we'll head to Talladega on April 23rd. Right after that, we'll head to Dover on April 30th. And after that, we'll head to Darlington on May 7th. After that, we'll be heading to Texas for the first of 2 times in 2022 on May 21st. And after that, we'll be heading to Charlotte on May 28th. And right after that, the Xfinity Series has a new date on their calendar for 2022. Portland will take place during the Gateway Cup and Truck Series weekends. We'll talk about that in a second. But Portland will be taking place on June 4th. Portland will be heading to the Xfinity Series for the first time in their calendar, and this will be the first time that NASCAR has had a sanctioned top 3 tier series event since all the way back, I believe, in 1999 or 2000. It's been quite a bit of time since that has happened. It's been rumored and reported for quite some time that Portland was expected to be on the Xfinity Series schedule, and it's confirmed that that will happen. Right after Portland, we'll head to Nashville on June 25th, and after that, we'll head to Road America on July 2nd. After that, we'll head to Atlanta on July 9th, and then we'll head to New Hampshire on July 16th. Right after that, we'll head to Pocono on July 23rd, and then we will head to Indy Road Course on July 30th. After that, we'll head to Michigan on August 6th, and then we'll head to Watkins Glen on August 20th. After that, we'll head to Daytona on August 26th, and then we'll go to Darlington on September 3rd. After that will be Kansas on September 10th, and then the final race before the playoffs, I believe, will take place at Bristol on September 16th. After that, we'll head to Texas on September 24th for the second time, and then we'll head to Talladega on October 1st. After that, we head to the Charlotte Roval on October 8th, then Vegas on October 15th for the second time. Then we will head to Homestead on October 22nd, Martinsville on October 29th, and finally, Phoenix will end the championship for the Xfinity Series in 2022. What are some of the changes for 2022? Really, one of the big ones that I noticed right off the bat is Portland is going to be on Xfinity. The notion, though, is that there will be no Xfinity Series race at Mid-Ohio in 2022. I'm probably forgetting some things, and I'll probably have to look back at what's missing from the Xfinity Series schedule. But one of the biggest changes is Portland being added to the schedule and one of the races being lost at Mid-Ohio. Now, we'll talk about Mid-Ohio and where that's going next year, but Portland will be joining the Xfinity Series schedule. It sucks for Mid-Ohio because Mid-Ohio, I think, was a very, very solid track as a whole. But that is the Xfinity Series schedule. I think it looks really, really solid. I do wish that there were 2 Texas dates. I think Texas does not deserve 2 dates. I think another track deserves it. I know what track probably deserves it, but I don't think it deserves to have 2 dates. I also don't personally think Vegas deserves to have 2 dates, in my personal opinion, for Xfinity. I do understand why Vegas is getting 2 dates next year because they have a contract with Vegas. But we'll talk about trucks in Vegas just a little bit. But that's definitely interesting going forward. And that's the Xfinity Series schedule. And now let's take a look at the Truck Series schedule going next year. And there are a lot of changes for the Truck Series schedule next year. Starting off will be Daytona on February 18th. After that, we'll have the Las Vegas on March 4th. First thing you notice, no Daytona Road Course for the Truck Series in 2020. That's another thing. No Daytona Road Course for the Xfinity Series as well. After Vegas, we'll head to Atlanta on March 19th, and then we'll head to Circuit Americas on March 26th. Right after that, we'll head to Martinsville on April 7th. The difference is Martinsville for the trucks is actually moved from the end of the season, this cutoff race for the Truck Series to the season finale. That is being moved to earlier in the year on Thursday, April 7th. So that's good to see that they're going to be moving earlier in the year. After that, we'll head to Bristol Dirt on April 16th, and then we'll head to Darlington on May 6th. Right after that, we'll head to Kansas on May 14th, and then we'll head to Texas on May 20th. After that, we'll head to Charlotte on May 27th, and then Worldwide Technology Racer for the Truck Series moves all the way up from late August all the way up to early in the year for the Cup Series and Truck Series weekends on Saturday, June 4th. After that, we're going to be going to a new road course on the Truck Series schedule. We are going to be going to Sonoma on June 11th. The last time the NASCAR Champion World Truck Series race at Sonoma Raceway was all the way back in 1998. I believe Borisset was able to score the victory in that event. This will be the first time that the Truck Series will compete at that track on, I believe it's June 22nd, like I said, June 11th will be the Truck Series event that takes place. So it's really good to see Sonoma is on the schedule. Right after Sonoma, we'll head to Knoxville on June 18th. Then after that, we'll head to Nashville on June 24th. After that, we'll head to Mid-Ohio. That's another new change on the schedule. Mid-Ohio is getting added officially to the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series schedule. They're moving that from the Xfinity Series schedule, and they're moving that to the Truck Series schedule for 2022. That'll be the third and final road course on the 2022 schedule. This will be the first time the Truck Series, I think, has had 3 road courses on their schedule in a very, very long time. So I'm really glad to see that Mid-Ohio is getting added. After that, we'll head to Pocono on July 23rd, and then we're making our return to an old classic track that was in the 1990s and the early 2000s up till 2011. Lucas Oil, also known as Indianapolis Raceway Park, is making its official return, and this is also going to be the earliest that the playoffs have ever started. That's right. The NASCAR Camping World Truck Series playoffs will begin at Lucas Oil Raceway on July 29th. After that, we'll head to we'll head to Richmond on August 13th, and then we'll have a little bit of break after that, and we will race then again on September 9th. Right after that, we'll head to Bristol on September 15th. After that, we'll head to Talladega on October 1st, then Homestead on October 22nd, and then we'll head to Phoenix Raceway for the season finale on November 4th. So what are the changes for the 2022 Truck Series schedule? First change, like I mentioned, Daytona Road Course is not going to be on the schedule. Las Vegas will not have a Truck Series date in the playoffs, and the reason is because they were not able to have a time and a ticker stand. They were not going to be able to have a race at that specific time. There was no TV availability for that, so that race is actually going to be going to Sonoma Raceway. Like I said, Sonoma has not had a Truck Series race since 1998, so the Truck Series will host a race right there. Another big change, Mid-Ohio to the Truck Series schedule, like I mentioned. Mid-Ohio going to trucks is probably going to be chaotic, and there's probably going to be craziness. It does suck the Xfinity Series is not going to be having a race right there, but I think that's compensation for the next track that we'll talk about in just a second. Speaking of which, Canadian Tire. A lot of people are not happy about Canadian Tire not being on Camping World Truck Series schedule, and I'm going to bring up a reason why that is not on the schedule. You look at the COVID restrictions in Canada right now. The COVID restrictions in Canada are very, very strict right now. And I know the race was not generally going to be until about this point or a little bit earlier in the year, around the first week of September. Generally, the Canadian Tire race is not till earlier in the year. That being said, though, you kind of want to have that be able to have opening for that, and it's really unclear if Toronto's going to happen next year. F1, it's unclear if they're going to have the Canadian Grand Prix right now. With how strict they are, now I've heard that maybe that they can allow vaccinated Americans are allowed to go into the border, which is something that's really definitely interesting, but I don't know how many drivers are currently vaccinated. But if you're unvaccinated, I believe you have to quarantine for 2 weeks, and I'm not exactly sure if drivers are going to want to follow that pursuit, and I think NASCAR made that right logical call to go right there. I will say the Truck Series schedule, though, looks really, really awesome. And the return to Lucas Oil, I've been wanting them to go back to IRP for so long, and the fact that we're going back to Indianapolis Raceway Park in 2022 is definitely extremely exciting, and I'm looking forward to it for sure. I'm really excited about the future of that. But I really like both schedules. There are some things that are negative about it. Again, I think there's only one race at Texas for trucks, which is really, really cool. But there's some things I really like and some things I really don't like at the same time. There are things that you're going to like on today's schedules and things you're not going to like on the schedule. So those are my opinions on the 2022 schedules. So, anyway, that is it for today's long NASCAR news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications so you're notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and support page as well. Let's get you below for that and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about the 2022 Xfinity and Truck Series schedules? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Matt DiBenedetto's future and where do you think he's going to end up in 2022? Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.